Hey everyone, and welcome back to Cow Talks. I am Marcelo Wallau, Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Florida and an agricultural producer myself. On this podcast, we explore the many facets of agricultural production systems to discuss the technical aspects and decision-making processes that shape the competitiveness and long-term sustainability of our farms and ranches. Join me in these conversations where I explore the minds of different professionals to bring multiple perspectives to the challenges and opportunities facing modern agriculture.
Hey there, it's Olivia Mull. I'm the producer for Cow Talks. As part of the Forage Extension team, our number one goal is to make sure our listeners are learning from and applying the knowledge we bring on this podcast. We want to hear more about how you are using this information and get your feedback on current and future topics. That's why we have created a quick survey to hear from you and make this podcast even more relevant to your needs. The link is in the description. Please take 2 minutes to leave us your feedback. Thanks in advance and enjoy this episode.
Hello, and welcome to Cow Talks. I'm Marcelo Wallau, Forage Extension Specialist and Associate Program Leader with the University of Florida. And today I have a special guest here. Dr. Nicolas DeLorenzo is a good longtime friend and colleague. He's a Braddock Endowed Professor at the North Florida Research and Education Center in Marianna, specializing in nutrition, in ruminant nutrition. He's with the Animal Science Department. We have just left the 75th Beef Cattle Short Course here at the University of Florida, which was amazing. And Dr. DeLorenzo gave one of the presentations that inspired me to record this podcast because he has been talking about byproducts and other strategies to feed our animals cheaper. Why is this important right now? We've been on the theme of drought. Drought is one of the main things we're worried about now, and not only now, but for the future. I have been talking a lot about different strategies on how we can supplement our animals, how we can feed our animals in a better way to sustain that performance and also cheap way. So, Dr. DeLorenzo, welcome to Cow Talks.
Thank you, Marcelo. This is amazing. Yeah, I've been hearing and seeing about Cow Talks, and it's good to finally be in the studio and have a chance to visit.
Yeah, we've been trying to record this for a while, and finally here. Nico, I know you work a lot on storage forage. You work on silage, work on hay, and also in supplementation, because at the end of the day, we're thinking about a full diet. We are in an extraordinary situation here with most of the state, about 70-something% of the state today is on D3 and D4, so severe drought. We're shorting forage. Our last podcast recorded last week with my colleague Bruno Pedreira from Tennessee. We're talking about we were short last summer. We could not cut hay, we could not stockpile, so 2 strikes there. We could not plant our cool season forages, 3 strikes, and now we are late in the summer into spring regrowth, so strike 4. And I don't see our pasture recovering anytime soon. Even if we get some good rains from now on, most likely we're going to start seeing pasture improvements sometime in June and hopefully in July. What have you seen? What's your perspective in this scenario of drought, a lot of feeding, and producers scrambling to be able to keep their operations and their cattle going?
Yeah, it's the talk of the moment, right? As you just mentioned, we're coming from the beef cattle short course where they were almost, I was kind of joking at the end, but almost every talk open or closed with the drought monitor slide. Just to call attention to whether they were talking about economics, they were talking about carcass quality. Drought is at the center of all this. And like you say, we're seeing the impact on many fronts. Every time we are in a drought situation, I always start getting phone calls. I got a 35% extension appointment. But it's usually it's much earlier, or it's a different time of the year. Usually it's October, November, when we're winding down our forage production for the summer, and people start looking at options of what to feed for the wintering part of it. But it's very rare to be talking about drought like right now. I've been in Florida 16 years. I remember writing an article saying feeding hay in May or something like that. I thought it was weird. People would say, nah, we don't feed hay in May. If I go back and I do the math, I think every May that I've been at the University of Florida, at least in North Florida, we've been feeding hay to bridge that gap between the winter annuals and the summer. But this is different. I don't think we ever seen this situation. And like you say, I think the impact is going to be much worse on the pastures that we're hoping to be grazing now, like in June, July, August. So I would not be surprised if we see a shift in the patterns of commodity feed buying. Normally, this is the time when nobody's buying or thinking of buying commodity feed. Typically, I see people getting by with forage reserves because they know they're about to start putting forage reserve, whether it's hay or haylage. They're going to start soon, but I'm seeing people now worried about feed. So not buying forage reserves because there's none out there. That's really one of the challenges. The question that you brought out, very important, is are the pastures going to be ready and will be producing to the same level that we're used to in, say, June, July? Because if not, we may be in a situation that we've never been before, feeding commodities to supplement our cattle and grazing at a time when we normally don't do that.
That is true. And not only that, the long-term effect of this in terms of the pasture conditions going into the summer and fall, and then also next year if we continue abusing some of those forages. Yeah. We're in a situation that a lot of our producers are still feeding hay, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. We're probably going to see a lot more people continue feeding hay. Now, considering this scenario, we were short in hay production last year because from August onward, it was dry, so a lot of people lost that last cut of hay. Now we should have already be ready, or even some people cutting the first cut of hay. We lost that too. Yeah. So we're 2 less cuts of hay here. Hay is going to be a very high commodity. The other thing, and I remember Josh talking about in one of the Ruminants Nutrition Symposium, said hay is one of the most expensive feedstuff in terms of nutrient.
100% agree.
But we actually need that because of that fiber content. We need to keep that rumen motility. We need to keep that rumen health. So hay is extremely important, or a source of fiber. What are the strategies that producers can do to balance that diet in a way that we are economizing, reducing that hay because it's so expensive, because it's not available, but in bringing some commodities, some byproducts or something else to supplement that diet to achieve the minimum levels of maintenance and performance we need?
I'll take a step back, and even before we get into the balancing in the commodity, this is the time maybe to bring up that. I mean, I have a talk that I repeat every 4 years or 5 on hay wasting, basically, and what are the options out there. And that's a pending study. I've never done that study, and I've been citing it out of Oklahoma, Midwest, different studies on that. I think our forages are different. I think our cows are different. I'm hoping to do a study on hay waste and what are the structures that can help us with that, because we've been experimenting with some of those structures. There's conical feeders, trailers, things that improve over having just on a hay ring. Another thing we just heard from the short course is the exceptional year that we had and we'll probably continue to have in terms of cattle prices. So this may be the year to invest in some of those structures that may help us saving some of the hay. Just to mitigate that. But as you say, that's not going to cut it. I mean, that alone is not going to cut it. We're going to have to supplement. And then it comes to commodities, which we don't have many. I mean, in Florida, we're deeply reliant on Midwest commodities. We do, and we are fortunate to have at least an infrastructure that would allow us to still buy, let's say, corn gluten feed at $230 a ton. But then we're limited in a lot of other byproducts that may be like wet distillers grain, things like that. Now, of course, when everybody wants commodity at the same price, even seasonal patterns really go out the window, because typically this is the time when we recommend people to buy or start buying. In the summertime is when those prices are low because people will have plenty of grass. But now everybody's looking for that. So maybe it's not going to be a typical situation where we see a summer low on prices. I'm not sure. But the good news is that we still have a lot of those byproducts available. Distillers is probably as cheap as it's ever been, even though it's not produced in this area anymore. I don't think we have any plant in the Southeast anymore producing distillers grain. But it is railed into some of our facilities and tracked at a decent enough cost that I think is going to be one of those buys. It is already one of the buys that it's going to be interesting. Whole cottonseed continues to be one of the best feeds that we have around. It's very seasonal, but it brings the whole package: fiber, fat, and energy, and protein. And if nothing else, everything else fails, corn gluten and soy hulls are always there. And that's one of the things that I always say. The price fluctuates, but that is probably, those two are the commodities that have been the most reliable year in and year out for the cattlemen in the area.
So corn gluten feed?
Corn gluten feed, whether it's pelleted, typically dry, and soy hulls.
And soy hulls. That's a diet that I like because it really brings the balance between fiber, fat, energy, and protein. When we're thinking about balancing those diets, what are the main criteria that we're following? Specifically, what I'm thinking about is my goal is to save hay. My goal is to reduce that hay intake, to limit that feed intake. How can I bring that supplementation in? How can I build that supplement to match that reduced hay intake without the adverse consequences of excessive concentrate in the diet?
That's a tricky part because, like you say, we want to enhance their growth. We really want them to meet their requirements, not to put fat on. That would not be a very efficient way to do it. We're just trying to survive through this drought, right? So the key to do is not to over supplement. The moment we do that, when any concentrate in general, but particularly when any of those starch-based concentrates, they're going to create a ruminal environment that will be detrimental to fiber digestion. So at the end, we may be negating some of those good effects, like having hay in the rumen. If we supplement maybe more than 1% of the body weight, that already gets to be more than a supplement. When we talk about, for instance, corn gluten soy hulls, usually for, let's say, had 500-pound cow, like half percent of the body weight, so 2.5, 3 pounds, it's plenty. That 50-50, again, there's something key about this 50-50 corn gluten soy hull, and that is that it combines a product like corn gluten feed, a byproduct from the wet milling of corn, that it is readily available here, usually pelleted or loose, but in a dry form in the southern part of the U.S., particularly in Florida. And soy hulls, which also dry, typically pelleted, the combination of those two brings the protein to the 14-15%, which is almost ideal for most situations, and then a TDN at about 78. So it's a perfect feed. Now the next question is how much to feed. And when and to what category. There's tools about that. The UF hay balancer that we put together with our friends on the Panhandle team, that's one of the tools that can help you. But like you say, the key on that will be to maximize hay intake, get enough of a gut fill, avoid metabolic problems, bloat, acidosis, etc., but yet make a good use of our hay, which is the primary resource. The cow or the steer or heifer, depending on what you were trying to supplement, they have to have something in their belly. We need to have gut fill before we supplement. Otherwise, it becomes a very expensive supplementation program.
You talk about fill, and actually that's one of the things that I was not considering as much when I was thinking about some of the supplementation strategies, because you need that fiber there for the motility. You need some of the fill to be able to bring that high energy feed. How much can we back off on that hay feeding? And recognizing that most of the time our beef cattle farmers, ranchers are feeding low quality hay. That hay is going to be sometimes at best 79% protein, probably anywhere between 45 and 52% digestibility.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. How much can we back off? I would, for the most part, what I recommend to do, try to stretch that by providing enough concentrate. Some could be starting at 0.5 of the body weight, depending on condition of the cow. It could be all the way to 0.8. I've seen programs at 0.3% that work really well. That's the minimum I would do. Less than that, it may not even be worth the diesel to go there to supplement, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think most of our ranchers now are on the other side. They're trying to go as high as possible on that supplementation, right?
And yeah, exactly. And going as high as possible. So, and then they will be grazing those calves, and 10 pounds a day of that, they'll be putting about 2 pounds a day of gain. So that's already maybe on the higher end. Somewhere in the lower end of that, it would be 5 to 7 pounds. And again, maybe depending on whether we're talking about cows, wintering cows, or we're just trying to get weaned calves to meet market weights for people that do contracts and that kind of stuff. But right now, maybe focusing more on the cow. I'm guessing that's maybe one of the biggest questions. I've seen people feeding 7 pounds of 50-50 corn gluten soy hull. There's one thing that probably needs to be said, especially about both corn gluten feed and soy hulls. When eating corn gluten feed by itself or soybean hulls by itself, for whatever reason, they cause trouble. Like there's something about the combination that makes them work together great. Give you an example. Sulfur, it's a problem with corn gluten feed. It's high in sulfur. 7 pounds is not going to, for the most part, hurt anything. But 10 pounds, depending on sulfur level, it could start creating problems. 12 pounds, 15 for sure. So that might be some of the challenges that sometimes we have to keep in mind. And soy hull by themselves, sometimes it can cause bloat. They have a very digestible fiber. Cattle consume them, especially if they are pelleted. They seem to, for whatever reason, be worse. Maybe more, they pack more on a mouthful. I'll have my student do a little experiment. We put soy hull pellets in a beaker. This is something cool to try in the lab. And because of the amount of pectin they have, they gelatinize it. You can almost see the effect that will cause in the rumen. They hydrate and they expand. So they've been known to cause bloat in some cases when fed by itself, like say at 15 pounds a head. So there's something about that 50-50 combination that makes it a really good combination. So sometimes I think to be on the safe side, we can easily feed 7 to 8 pounds, and that will cut the hay by itself. The challenging part is how to limit hay intake, because that's really tricky. Yeah. I haven't seen people successfully, other than perhaps not replacing the rolls as they get used, forcing them to eat all the way to the bottom, minimize the waste, maximize intake. What we would hope is that by giving them more concentrate, we know they'll eat all of the concentrate. Then we're going to try to meet some of their requirements, especially for energy. They're going to get to that satiety signals, and then eat hay as much as they can, but hopefully it won't be the full maybe 25 pounds that they would eat a big cow. I haven't seen a cow eat 25 pounds of hay in a long time, but that's what some of the, if you do the math on that 2% of the body weight, that's what some of those big cows should be eating, and I challenge that number always.
Yeah, I think that would be another very long conversation about what the fuel is and about the difference. And I really like that research you've done with high quality forage and very low quality forage, and both have limitations in intake because of different types of fuel. But don't want to get into that quite yet. You talk a lot today about cotton feed, cotton meal, gene trash, cottonseed meal, and other products from cotton. We also understand that cotton right now is not in a very good position. Cotton prices are very low. Our producers planting cotton are losing a lot of money. I don't know what's the availability going to be for that. But I know it's a big crop in the Panhandle in South Georgia, South Alabama, all the way into Texas, many other places. Yeah. Tell me a little more about the differences in the byproducts of cotton, why you like them so much, and how they can compose a diet for us here in our region.
Number one, they're readily available, and that's one of the main reasons that we have them there. I hope we never get to what's happening to the citrus pellets. I love citrus pellets. I used to do a lot of diets with that, and now it's very hard to find them. And a lot of different things led to that. I just hope we don't lose the ability to continue to use cotton byproducts. So typically, cottonseed meal is sort of the Cadillac of the cotton byproduct. Although if you ask me, I almost prefer whole cottonseed because it has a whole package. Whole cottonseed has enough fiber. It has fat in it. It has protein. And it's bulky enough. One of the extension agents asked me today, and they talk about, clarify how good it is whole cottonseed to feed on the ground. And that's a good point. Cows can pick up whole cottonseed fed in the ground, although I always try to avoid that. I think
it's waste.
It is a waste. I think we, especially in a year like this, where we can maybe afford to invest a little bit in infrastructure, if nothing else, we can invest. There's been great advances on feed troughs that now don't get destroyed that easily. So anyway, that point aside, whole cottonseed, it's a good one.
How is the digestibility of that in the rumen? Does it break down well?
It does. It does to some extent. It is. There's a lot of fat in it. So one of the challenges with whole cottonseed is the amount of fat. So in other words, yes, it has fiber, and you have probably a lot of fiber being fed in the form of hay. But if you have enough whole cottonseed, and I don't know what enough will be, but I maybe do the math not to exceed like 6% of the diet, 5% maybe even better of fat, and we have programs that can balance for that. And that, if we keep in mind the amount of fat in cotton, that could very well be 10 to 15 pounds of cotton per cow. It could get us close. The biggest issue is too much fat. Talking about rumen digestion may limit fiber digestion. So we want to avoid that, because typically we will be supplementing this. It's not a product that is as affordable because of all the good things that it brings. The whole package, easy to feed. It does not flow very well out of feeders. That's one challenge. So people feeding whole cottonseed typically will do it in a way that they'll have to be delivered in a trough, because it will not flow out of a cell feeder. But it is one of the best products. It's not as available as it used to be, at least. And now, as a result, we get a cottonseed meal, which is the next best thing. 40 plus, sometimes 46, 47% protein. It is a meal, flows very well out of everything, has a great digestibility, and usually in the mid-70s for TDN in terms of energy. So it is a great product, good profile of amino acids. I just hope it doesn't go away. But typically, we cannot find that for less than $300 a ton. So it is an expensive one. It's one byproduct that definitely I would limit feed. And when I said limit feed, normally 3 pounds a day of that, it's enough to meet the requirements of that cow. The other two that I spent a lot of time today talking was what we call a cotton gin byproduct. Some people may refer to that as gin trash. That is one of the byproducts that today is probably best priced. It's basically, as the name implies, it's a residue after the harvest and the cleaning. But we've seen it ranging from $20 to $60 a ton, which is great. And that would be the replacement for hay. So today is kind of circling back to hay shortage. That may be the one product that I would be okay feeding free choice to cows. But keeping in mind that it will be like a very low quality hay. I mean, we have as low as 6% crude protein in some of the testing, and as high as 16 or 18%. Now, I don't believe those 18% to me are, maybe we sample an area full of leaves. It's hard to find that. Yeah.
You were thinking about quality. Everything's relative here. Like when you say gin trash is bad because it's 4%, 6% protein, but sometimes our limpo grass hays are 2 to 3%, and half of that's tied up on fibers not digested by the animal. It's going to be excreted anyhow.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things that I've heard before was the use of cottonseed trash on pastures, or actually this was on cropland, that ended up resulting in more weeds in that field because the cotton trash was weedy. What is that cotton trash? Talk today about the word trash and not be associated with a negative perception, and how we can prevent some of the issues that would come with dirty trash with weed seeds.
That's a good point, Marcelo. I don't know the answer to that. We've seen it with all kinds of other byproducts in the past. When I first started at UF, I remember the big negative of gin trash, as we call it, or cotton gin byproduct, was the pieces of metal or all the potential for hardware disease in cattle because of not proper cleaning. Today, I mean, I don't think that's a concern. When I talk to people, we have improved the way we harvest. There's a lot of magnets and a lot of the machine. I don't think that is a concern anymore. I don't hear anybody talking about pieces of wire or metal in the gin trash. But the issue of the weeds, it's a real one. I'm not sure what the solution for that. I might have to talk to an agronomist about how to kill. We're probably creating more work for an agronomist and how to kill those weeds afterwards.
It is a challenge, but I think it comes with the territory, and there are strategies to mitigate that challenge, such as selecting a site of feeding. And one of the things I'm very adamant about is to have sections of the pasture where we're doing this feeding. For hay, it doesn't matter, it's for hay, for supplement. And I understand the idea of spreading that manure, spreading that hay residue across the pasture, because that is not nutrient cycling. But there is always a potential negative impact of weeds in that hay or in that feed, or even of the trampling, killing a little bit of the pasture. So I'm a big advocate for sacrifice areas where we're going to do those managements, and we can manage them better. Even on a center pivot, if you're feeding during the winter because you're short on forage, winter forages, you can section off part of that pivot, a corner to do that management.
That's a good point. Those sacrifice areas are a big part of the management, and nobody wants to talk about them, but they're very useful.
Nico, I want to change gears a little bit, and we know that Florida is a very populous state. We have huge urban population. With a huge urban population and huge industry, we have a lot of surplus of products, especially horticultural products and industrial products. Today we're talking about some baked goods that can become feed. I'm also thinking about horticultural products that get wasted either on farm, or on the processing, or even at the end of the supermarket and later. You talk about upcycling. What is that concept? How can we bring that into our feed management?
That's an interesting concept. I don't know who coined that term, upcycling, but I heard it a couple years back, and I know it's a buzzword. But basically, it is a fancy way of saying what ruminants do. Basically, they bring something, so they have all this basic building block, whether it's sugars, protein, things that mostly are unedible by humans, and they turn that into this awesome nutritional value protein, animal proteins that we enjoy, whether it's beef or dairy goods. So basically that's what it is, upcycling, basically turning, I guess, and this is my interpretation, as opposed to recycling, which will be to make a similar use of something or reuse something. This is really making a good use of something basic and turning it into something that is more advanced. That would be my very I get limited understanding of that. So the way it's easier for me to explain it in terms of rumen metabolism. It's just upcycling to me is feeding sugars like from molasses and protein from urea to a cow that is eating hay, and be able to have a prime steak at the end of that process with very simple things that normally, obviously it's a lot more complicated than that, but that's kind of a way to put it. Just try to figure out how to add value to some of that, like you say, that some are waste products. Some of those are really waste products. The cool vegetable. And the bakery waste is one that it's been in my mind for a while. I haven't done any research with it, but I keep hearing, like you and everybody, this talks about how like we have the population migration to Florida is crazy. We add a city the size of Orlando per year. I heard it in so many different statistics. We can count on having more people consuming food in Florida and wasting more food. So as a way to keep our state green and clean, I think this bakery, waste, and maybe more than just bakery, any other food waste, it's one of the craziest statistics to me is that 1,000 pounds of food get wasted by a family of 4. That's kind of one of the things that it's been resonating with me, and it's just a tremendous amount of food that is wasted. Now, the logistics of that, it's a nightmare, and that's the reality of it. Why we don't have more food recycling places in Florida or anywhere else is because it's not that simple. Our climate, it's the way it is. Things spoil very quickly. Usually the things come in packages, so they have to be removed. But on the flip side, we have technology that it's advancing. We have AI now. We should be designing machines where we can dump the whole package and even segregate some of the compounds into different streams and come out with a more balanced approach. The one negative, perhaps the more negative thing about this bakery waste is the inconsistency. Every time I talk to people that are using them. So if we can come up with a consistent product, imagine, to me, it's an amazing way. I describe it as the steam flake corn of the Southeast. So if we can come up with our own way to have something that it is that with high energy, maybe we can solve our shortage of corn and maybe even start finishing some cattle in the area.
Yeah, you bet. There is a difference between food waste and food loss. And the challenge is having that consistency, as you said, and be able to feed that. One thing that I'm curious about, and our colleague from Canada, Tim McAllister, has done a very interesting work recently in looking at how to use that and ensile that, because actually if you can ensile, you reduce that seasonality. There is a lot of work on that, and I think it's something interesting that we should be looking more into, because it bothers me the amount of food that we waste in the United States here. It's something that we really need to rethink as a society, the amount of food that goes to waste, because we know how much it takes to produce it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For people to waste, and it's disheartening.
Absolutely, and we know that cattle will make a very good use of that. That's back to the upcycling concept. That's really a great way to use it.
Yeah, so actually, from another perspective, I think cattle, with another mechanism, they become the solution for the food problem. A lot of people would like to think about cattle as a problem in the food system because they take so much potentially edible product or arable land to produce, but in fact, when you look into the numbers, we see that they actually use a lot of unusable products in land to produce. Completely different conversation.
Yeah.
But I want to change our gears here and think about the future. So we start talking about the challenges we have today. We start talking about the drought and the challenges we're going to face in this season. But I'm afraid that some of those challenges are not going to be unique for 2025 and 2026. According to several predictions in terms of the changes we're having in global environment, in multiple aspects, not only climate, but land use, markets, many other things, as we're seeing today, wars, everything is becoming more volatile.
Yes.
We need to think about our systems at a much greater magnitude and altitude now, and you use the word holistic. We need to have a holistic planning for the future. Thinking about that and about the challenges we face now and the increased frequency of those challenges in the future, what is your ideal scenario in terms of forage reserves and then feeding?
Great question, Marcelo. This is something that's been on my mind, and I'm really not as good as I should be at marketing things, but I really should market a case study, which is what we've done at NFREC. We have, because of certain characteristics we have at NFREC, we've chosen to put a lot of emphasis on ensil feeds, and we started with corn, the easier one, the one there's more information. Then we're going to move to the double rotation of corn sorghum. So in 1 year, we'll be growing corn and sorghum and ensiling. And back to the holistic concept, one thing that started, or maybe 7 years ago, with silage. And for us at NFREC, again, where I'm located, it has changed our nutrition to the point that were kind of jokingly talking at the beginning. Normally, I'll be going crazy with a drought like this with our 350 cows that we have and about 1,000 acres of pasture that includes some of the pens. We don't have enough forage reserve. We didn't have in the past. It was every year. I remember the struggle when it came to this time, May, and particularly October, November, December. If there was a bad year for winter annuals, we'll be feeding hay sometimes into big parts of January. Silage has really given us that independence. We're harvesting in 1 day the entire forage for the year. I was skeptical about the yields and the consistency. My recommendation to anybody wanting to try is partner with someone that knows how to grow it. It's not something to do if you're like a rancher that maybe have a tractor and maybe want to plant, unless you really know what you're doing. There's so much technology today that goes into planting corn, even sorghum, a lot to a lesser degree sorghum, but corn, from picking the hybrid to fertilization program to scouting, definitely is something that needs to go into that and know when to do different applications. But in our case, that has changed our program. The aggravating part is the feeding, as I always say. But even taking advantage of forage reserves in the form of hay, when I first started in 2010 in Florida, I remember talking to producers. They say Florida is the worst to produce hay because the best time to produce hay, at least in northern Florida, is when it rains the most. So you got a beautiful hay crop, you lay it down on the ground, and then it gets rained on next day. So that's when I started seeing people moving to haylage more and more. Aggravating part of haylage, you're carrying out water to the pasture consistently. So you have to account for that. You have to feed more bales than you do hay. But at the end of the day, the quality, I would argue sometimes is it's same or even better. The more important part is the convenience. You don't have to put up a barn, and you can store in the field all your forage reserves with minimal losses. So that would be the less of haylage. Haylage would be one next step. And then, like we have done, going to ensil feed. I think we can do in Florida, anywhere in Florida, I think we can do a phenomenal job of growing forages of any kind, whether it's corn, sorghum, Hermatria. We have forages that grow. We have conditions that we can grow. So you also ask a great question today. Can we ensile some of those things? Well, what if we ensile something of high volume like limpograph and perhaps just grind some of the cool vegetables that will provide some of the sugars that limpograph may not have? Or even like some of my colleagues in ONA have done, do limpograph and molasses, something as simple as that.
Increase that sugar. I was reading several research articles from other countries that they've been ensiling corn stover.
Oh, yeah.
So after harvesting the corn, ensiling that stover with cabbage waste, with cassava waste, so it increases the moisture and add that soluble sugar there to be able to induce fermentation. And that's one of the challenges with some of the warm season perennial grasses. We just don't have enough sugars for them to ferment well. So we need to find alternatives like molasses or like other byproducts that could be co-ensiled.
I think we need to capitalize on the technology. There's machines that can harvest things faster today and on the amount of byproducts and that we have in Florida. So I think there is a lot of room for improvement in our forage reserves systems.
Yeah, and also in the integration of systems. Just because there is so much potential in the synergy between different systems. As you said, horticultural products. Another one in terms of considering big picture forage reserves is the solar system, solar grazing.
Yes.
Many things that can be done to increase grazing areas, to increase the use of products that are available for feed.
Absolutely.
Nico, this has been a fantastic conversation. I wish we had more time. I need to bring you back because there is a lot more I want to ask. I would like to invite you to leave a final message here for our listeners. I think a lot of people are struggling this year, and we want to give a good message, especially one that can prepare us for the years to come. Action items you would think about this year. What is the big lesson now, and how we apply that for improving the resilience of this beef cattle production system in Florida here?
The big lesson to me is start thinking this is going to happen more and more. It is happening more every year. It's not something random. It used to be like every so many years. It seems like it's happening more and more often. For me, the lesson is to think in the time when we have a lot of forage, and we produce a lot of forage. We're about to get into that, June, July, August. Think about how to harvest some of that. It doesn't have to be silage, baleage. It could be stockpile, hermatria. But think about the time where there's going to be dry and you're going to be needing that feed. Or think about investing. Now would be a good time with cattle prices and commodity barn structures to be able to store some of that. Because one of the biggest issues with commodities is storage. But at the same time, I've seen very creative ways. I've seen people stacking containers and putting a roof over as a makeshift commodity barn, working really well. I've seen concrete, like the way they would do in the Midwest with some of those concrete blocks, and then putting bales on the side and maybe a tarp over. There's very creative ways, but now is the time to think about it. This is going to happen again, and we'll be in a situation where forage is going to be short.
Fantastic. Nico, thanks so much for being here with us in the Cow Talks. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And for those that listen this podcast, we really like to hear your feedback. So please take 2 minutes and complete the survey we have in the description of this podcast. We want to improve this podcast for you and also to learn how you're using this information. I want to leave another plug in here. May 28th, 2026. May 28th is our corn, silage, and forage field day happening at the Plant Science Research and Education Unit. So if you're listening this in time here before May 28th, 2026, come and see us at the Plant Science Unit. We're going to be talking from all aspects of corn silage, sorghum silage, and other forage management with fantastic colleagues that are coming to visit us from the production side all the way into the feeding and planning and feeding side. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in our next Cow Talks podcast. This podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida Forage Team with technical support from the UF Cows Faculty Instructional Resource and Support Team. This episode was produced by Marcelo Wallau, Olivia Mowley, and Ashley Kalabrowski. I hope you have enjoyed this conversation. And if you have any feedback, please leave us a comment in our social media or send us an email to forages@ifas.ufl.edu. Until the next one,